He was the most feared man in the city, and she was the waitress no one ever noticed. But in the back booth of a dimly lit restaurant, Don Alessandro Costello, bored with his men, asked her a question as a joke. "This rival of mine, how would you handle him?" The table waited for a giggle or a nervous stutter. Instead, the waitress set down a water glass, looked the devil in the eye, and gave him an answer that stopped his heart. Her first words weren't just a strategy, they were a prophecy, and by the time she finished, the most powerful man in Chicago knew his world was about to change forever. The smell of old leather, garlic, and expensive whiskey clung to the air in Galliano's. It was the kind of old-school Italian restaurant in Chicago where deals were made in plush, dark red booths, and the waiters knew to be both deaf and blind. For the Costello family, it was their unofficial boardroom. At the head of the largest booth sat Alessandro Alex Costello. He was a man who looked more like a hedge fund manager than a mafia boss. Impeccable custom suit, a Patek Philippe on his wrist, and cold, analytical blue eyes. With him were his top men, including his aging consigliere, Marco, who had served his father. "He's an animal, boss," one of his capos, Tony, was saying. "This new guy, Bianchi, he hits our warehouse on the south side. No finesse, just fire and bullets. He's making us look weak." Alessandro rubbed his temple, bored. Marcus, the Viper Bianchi, was a new money problem. All flash and brutality, no long-term vision. He was a rabid dog, and Alessandro hated dealing with rabid dogs. It was messy. "So we hit him back. An eye for an eye," Tony insisted. "And he hits us back. Then we hit him. Then he hits us," Alessandro replied, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "And while we're playing this childish game, our legitimate businesses, our real money, suffer from the disruption." The feds start sniffing around. "It's stupid, Tony. It's what he wants." The table went silent. A shadow moved at the edge of the booth. "More water, Mr. Costello." It was the waitress, Elara. She'd been working at Galliano's for 3 years. She was plain, efficient, and forgettable. Brown hair pulled into a tight bun, an apron stained with wine, and eyes that never, ever met theirs. She was just part of the furniture. Alessandro watched her slender, pale hand refill his glass. He was frustrated with his men. He was tired of the problem. A strange, cruel spark of amusement lit his eyes. He gestured to her. His men looked confused. "You, waitress. Elara, is it?" Elara froze. In 3 years he had never spoken her name. "Yes, sir." "You hear us? You've been hovering for 10 minutes. This rival, this Bianchi, he's a snake in our garden. He's causing problems." Tony and Marco looked at their boss like he was crazy. Marco gave a slight shake of his head. "Don't do this, Alex." Alessandro ignored him. He leaned forward, a predator playing with a mouse. "Tell me, Elara, just for fun, how would you handle a rival like that? A man who wants to burn down everything you've built?" Tony snickered, expecting her to drop the pitcher. Elara did not drop the pitcher. She stood perfectly still for a second, her gaze fixed on the water cascading into the glass. The entire booth, the entire section of the restaurant, seemed to fall into a vacuum of silence. When she finished pouring, she placed the pitcher on her tray. She didn't giggle. She didn't look scared. She slowly lifted her eyes and met Alessandro's. They were not the mousy, brown eyes he'd expected. They were a deep, clear grey, and they were utterly devoid of fear. They were analytical. "You don't fight a snake, Mr. Costello," she said, her voice low and clear. "Especially not a rabid one. You'll just get bit." The table's mild amusement vanished. Alessandro's smile faded. You find out what it eats, Ilara continued, her eyes holding his. You find its food source, and you poison it. You don't waste your time chasing it through the grass. You let it crawl back to its den and die of starvation, or poison, whichever is more efficient. Alessandro's blood went cold. She wasn't done. But Bianchi isn't a snake. You called him a rabid dog. You don't poison a rabid dog. It's too unpredictable. You find its nest, where it sleeps. You find everything it cares about. Then you wait for it to be at its most vulnerable, and you don't hit back. You put it down. She picked up her tray. And you make sure everyone else in the garden sees you do it, so they know never to come into your yard again. Metaphorically, of course. She gave a small, polite nod. Will there be anything else, sir? The booth was silent. Tony's jaw was open. Marco looked horrified. Alessandro Costello, the man who had faced down cartel leaders and senators without flinching, was utterly speechless. He watched her walk away, her footsteps silent on the thick carpet. He finally turned back to his men. Marco, he said, his voice dangerously soft. I want to know everything about her. I want to know where she was born, who she talks to, and what brand of toothpaste she uses. Do it. Now. The next 48 hours were a torment for Alessandro. Her words echoed in his head. Poison the food source. Find its nest. It was cold. It was clinical. It was brilliant. It was the kind of ruthless, high-level strategy he'd been trying to beat into his capos for years. He sat in his penthouse office, a glass skyscraper overlooking Millennium Park, when Marco brought the file. The girl, Ilara Vance, Marco said, his face grim. He placed a thin manila folder on the polished obsidian desk. There's a problem. What problem? There's nothing. Alessandro looked up. What do you mean, nothing? I mean, she's a ghost, Marco said, flipping the folder open. According to this, Ilara Vance was born 28 years ago in Dayton, Ohio. Parents died in a car crash when she was 19. She has a community college degree in hospitality management. She moved to Chicago 5 years ago, worked at 2 other diners before Galliano's. No credit cards until 5 years ago. No social media. No digital footprint at all before she arrived in Illinois. Her social security number was issued 5 years ago. Alessandro leaned forward. A new number, at 23. It's a clean identity, boss. Too clean. It feels like a cover. A deep one. Marco's eyes were filled with suspicion. She's a plant. She must be. Maybe she's Fed's. Maybe she's Bianchi's. Alessandro stared out the window at the city lights. No. If she were Fed's, she wouldn't have said what she said. It's too dark. If she were Bianchi's, she would have been too stupid. Bianchi doesn't have thinkers like that. Then who is she? Marco pressed. She's dangerous, Alex. A woman with a mind like that, and a past she's buried? She's a liability. She's an asset, Alessandro corrected him, standing up. I'm going back to the restaurant. Boss, that's not a good idea. Let my men pick her up. No, Alessandro said, adjusting his cuffs. This isn't an interrogation. It's a job interview. He arrived at Galliano's during the dead hour between the dinner rush and the late-night drinkers. The restaurant was nearly empty. Ilara was at the bar, meticulously polishing wine glasses, her back to the door. She didn't look up as he approached, but he saw her shoulders tense. She knew it was him. Ilara, he said. She turned slowly, the polishing cloth still in her hand. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a new, very real fear. The analytical coldness was gone. She looked like the waitress again. Mr. Costello, we're closing this section. I'm not here for dinner. He sat on a stool opposite her. That was some answer you gave the other night. She looked down, her hands visibly trembling. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't know what came over me. I read a lot of spy novels. It was stupid. Please forget I said anything." He smiled, a cold, thin smile. "I can't. Poison the food source. That's not from a spy novel. That's from a boardroom or a war room." Her breath hitched. "I'm just a waitress." "You are a terrible liar," he said softly. "I'm a man who deals in logistics, Elara. Global shipping. It's complicated. I need people who see the whole board, not just the next move. I'm offering you a job, analyst, at my corporate headquarters. You'll make 10 times what you make here." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. "No. Thank you, Mr. Costello, but no, I can't." "Why not?" "I like my life. It's simple, it's quiet. Please, just let me be a waitress." He studied her. The panic was real. She wasn't holding out for more money. She was genuinely terrified of the offer. She was terrified of him, of being seen, of leaving her quiet, simple life. "I don't think you understand," Alessandro said, his voice hardening. "That wasn't entirely a request." "Please, Mr. Costello," she whispered, backing away a step. "You have to let me say no. I don't want your world." "It's too late," he said, standing up. "You're already in it. You showed me your mind, Elara. I can't let that go." He was about to say more, to tell her she didn't have a choice, when the front windows of Galliano's exploded inward. The sound was deafening. 2 black Escalades had screeched to a halt on the curb. 4 men, clad in black, carrying baseball bats and crowbars, stormed into the restaurant. They weren't there to kill, they were there to send a message, Bianchi's message. The few remaining staff screamed and dove for cover. Alessandro's bodyguard, waiting by the door, immediately drew his weapon and tackled the first man. "Get down!" Alessandro roared, grabbing Elara and pulling her behind the thick marble bar. The second thug vaulted over the bar, a bat raised high. Alessandro moved to intercept him, but Elara was faster. She didn't scream. She didn't cower. Her body moved with a speed and precision that was terrifying. She grabbed a full bottle of Campari from the speed rail and smashed it over the man's head. He roared in pain. As he stumbled, she snatched a paring knife from the cocktail station and, in one fluid motion, drove it 2 inches into his shoulder, just above the collarbone. The man collapsed, howling. Alessandro stared at her, stunned. His bodyguard was struggling with 2 others. The 4th man saw his boss's prized Maserati parked outside. "Forget this! Burn the car!" He ran back outside with a can of gasoline. "No!" Alessandro yelled, starting to move, but Elara grabbed his arm. "It's a diversion!" she hissed. "They're trying to draw you out! Stay down!" As if on cue, a sniper's shot rang out, shattering the mirror behind where Alessandro had just been standing. His blood ran cold. This wasn't just a message, it was an execution, and Bianchi's men knew exactly where to find him. In the chaos, Elara looked at him, her face a mask of cold fury. "They knew you were here. They were waiting for you." The sirens wailed in the distance. The remaining thugs scrambled back into their Escalades and sped off. Alessandro was breathing heavily, his heart hammering. He looked at Elara, who was wiping blood off her hands with the polishing cloth. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were the same ones from the other night, cold, analytical, lethal. He grabbed her arm. This time he wasn't asking. "They've seen your face. You're marked. You're not safe here. You're not safe anywhere." No, I can't. You're coming with me," he growled. He dragged her through the kitchen and out the back exit, shoving her into the armored sedan his bodyguard had, waiting in the alley. The simple life was over. Elara said nothing the entire ride. She just stared out the tinted window, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap her knuckles were white. The simple life she had built for 5 years had evaporated in 5 minutes. They didn't go to his penthouse. Alessandro's bodyguard, Rico, drove them to a discreet, high-security building in the financial district. It was one of Alessandro's corporate holdings, a place not even his own family knew he used. The elevator required his thumbprint and a code. He led her into a sprawling, sterile apartment that looked more like a command center than a home. One wall was all glass, overlooking the Chicago River. The others were lined with servers and monitors. "Where are we?" she whispered. "A place no one knows exists. My personal safe house," he said, pouring 2 glasses of brandy. He handed one to her. Her hand was steady. "You're not a waitress," he stated. She took a long sip, the fire of the alcohol doing nothing to warm her. "No. The way you moved, the knife, that wasn't a spy novel. That was training." She let out a shaky breath, a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "You have no idea." He sat across from her. "So tell me, who is Elara Vance?" She looked at the glass in her hand. "Elara Vance is a ghost. She's a nobody. She's a waitress who keeps her head down and her mouth shut. She's the woman I was supposed to be. And who were you before?" She finally met his gaze. The fear was still there, but beneath it was a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. "My name is Dr. Sophia Vance. I was a senior risk analyst for Aegis Defense Solutions." Alessandro's eyebrows rose. Aegis was not a small name. They were a global private military contractor. They didn't just guard facilities, they advised governments. They ran intelligence operations that the CIA wouldn't touch. "My specialty," she continued, her voice flat, "was predictive modeling. I didn't just analyze risk, I predicted it. I wrote the algorithm that forecast the collapse of the Vartanian regime. I told them, to the day, when the insurgency in Mali would hit the capital." Alessandro felt a chill. "You told me how to handle Bianchi. Your problem is simple," she said, almost dismissively. "You're fighting over territory. I was modeling the destabilization of entire countries. My job was to find the food source, the nest, the single point of failure, a corrupt general, a weak supply line, a secret bank account, and I would advise my superiors on how to poison it." "Why are you a waitress at Galliano's?" Her face darkened. "Because I got too good at my job. I was running a diagnostic on our own internal network. I found an anomaly, a food source. One of our own executives, General Mark Price, a man everyone revered. He was selling our predictive models, not to a rival company, to a rogue state. He was selling them the blueprint on how to destabilize his own country." She stood up, pacing like a caged animal. "I filed the report, quietly, to the one person I thought I could trust. 2 days later, my car was run off a bridge in D.C. I barely survived. They thought I was dead. I had a go bag, a clean identity I'd built for a worst-case scenario. I ran. I erased Sophia Vance, Ph.D., and I became Elara Vance, the waitress, the girl nobody looks at twice." Alessandro stared at her, mesmerized. This woman wasn't just smart. She was a weapon, a nuclear-grade weapon that had been hiding in plain sight, polishing his wine glasses. "You've been hiding for 5 years," he said. "And I was safe," she said, her voice cracking. "I was safe until you asked me that stupid question." "You were never safe," he countered, stepping toward her. "You were just biding your time. A woman like you can't be a waitress forever. It's not in your nature. You don't know my nature. Your nature is to win, he snapped. Your nature is to see the whole board. And you are in the game now, whether you like it or not. Bianchi's men saw you. They saw you with me. They saw you fight. They will assume you are my woman or my advisor. They will hunt you, Elara. And so will General Price, if he ever gets a hint that you're alive. He was inches from her now. She was trembling, but she didn't back away. You have one choice, he said, his voice dropping. Keep running and die, or you can stand and fight. With me. Fight you. Fight with me. That offer I made you, it's no longer for an analyst at my logistics company. I want Dr. Sophia Vance. I want the woman who can topple regimes. What are you offering? She whispered. You help me with Bianchi. You use that brilliant, ruthless mind of yours, and you help me end him. Not hit him back. End him. And in return, I'll give you something Aegis Defense never could. What? General Price, Alessandro said. You're a ghost. You can't touch him. But I'm not. I have a global network. I have men in DC, in London, in Dubai. You help me take my city, and I'll help you hunt the man who took your life. I will find him, and I will give him to you. It was a deal with the devil, but Elara was tired of running. She looked at the man who was, by all accounts, a monster. But he was the first person in 5 years who had seen her for who she truly was. And he wasn't afraid. She stopped shaking. The fear in her eyes was replaced by the cold, clear grey of the analyst. Get me a computer, she said, and get me every piece of data you have on Marcus Bianchi. His operations, his men, his family, his favorite restaurant. I want to know what he eats. For the next 3 days, Sophia, she had shed Elara the moment she sat at the terminal, didn't sleep. She lived on black coffee and a terrifying cold fury. Alessandro gave her everything: decades of Costello surveillance, financial records, informant reports. To him, it was a messy pile of street-level intel. To her, it was a data set. You're running this all wrong, she muttered on day 2, her eyes glued to a screen. Alessandro, who had been watching her work, leaned against the wall. Excuse me? Your whole organization. It's antique. You're structured like a 1920s gang. You have muscle fighting muscle. You hit a truck. He hits a truck. It's loud, it's messy, and it's unprofitable. This isn't a war, Mr. Costello. It's a hostile takeover, and you're letting the loud, stupid new CEO set the terms. So what's your plan, Doctor? He asked, deeply impressed. Bianchi's strength is his legitimacy, she said, pulling up a complex flowchart. You see him as a thug. The feds see him as a logistics man. He owns Santino Logistics. It's a real functioning import-export business. That's his food source. It's how he launders all his illicit money from the docks. We know this, Marco said, entering the room with more coffee. He was still deeply wary of her. We've been trying to get one of our men inside. Don't, Sophia said, not even looking at him. Why send a soldier when you can send a decimal point? His entire operation is leveraged. He's using the legitimate income to get loans to fund his war against you. She pointed to a name on the screen. Richard Flynn. He's a customs official at the port of Chicago. You think he's on your payroll? He is. But he's also on Bianchi's. He's a double agent. He's the one who gave Bianchi the schedule for your warehouse. Marco went pale. That's impossible. It's not. Look at his financials. Small, weekly payments from a holding company you own, and large monthly payments from a shell corp registered in the Caymans. That's Bianchi. Alessandro felt a surge of cold anger. So we kill Flynn. No! Sophia snapped, spinning in her chair. God, you're all so crude. If you kill Flynn, Bianchi knows you're on to him. He just buys another official. You don't kill the rat. You use him. She turned back to the screen. Here's what we do. We don't hit Bianchi's illicit business. We hit his legitimate one. We're going to use Flynn to do it. She typed furiously. Bianchi is bringing in a massive shipment of textiles next Tuesday. It's clean. It's for his Santino Logistics company. It's the collateral for his new bank loan. We are going to make that shipment disappear. We hit the truck? Tony asked, having just joined them. No, Tony, Sophia said, her voice dripping with condensation. We are going to tip off Homeland Security. We're going to send an anonymous, very detailed tip that Bianchi is smuggling weapons-grade plutonium in his textile shipment. We'll use specific terminology that I may have acquired from my time at Aegis. It will trigger every single terrorism keyword in their system. Alessandro began to smile. They'll seize the shipment. They'll do more than that, Sophia said. They'll lock down the entire port. They will impound all of Santino Logistics' assets, pending a full investigation. They will freeze his bank accounts. The loan he was getting? It won't just be denied, it will be flagged by FinCEN. By Wednesday, Marcus Bianchi will be a legitimate businessman under active federal investigation for terrorism. He won't be able to buy a pack of gum, let alone pay his soldiers. She leaned back. He'll be crippled, bankrupt, and you never fired a shot. His own legitimate world will eat him alive. That is poisoning the food source. Marco was silent, his suspicion replaced by awe. And Flynn? Alessandro asked. Flynn is the source of the anonymous tip, Sophia said. We use a dead drop, a burner phone. We make it look like he tried to get a massive payout from you. You refused, and he turned to the feds as revenge. Bianchi will think Flynn betrayed him. The feds will see Flynn as a compromised official. He's finished from both sides. 2 problems. One very elegant solution. Alessandro looked at her, his attraction to her mind so intense it was a physical ache. Sophia, you're terrifying. I'm just a waitress, Mr. Costello, she replied, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. Now get me a secure line. We have a tip to make. The plan worked with a precision that was almost anticlimactic. On Tuesday, the port of Chicago was swarmed by federal agents in full tactical gear. The Chicago Tribune ran a front-page story. Local businessman linked to WMD smuggling plot. Santino Logistics was shut down. Bianchi's accounts were frozen. His men, unpaid and spooked by the word terrorism, began to disappear. Flynn, the customs official, was taken into federal custody. Bianchi, in a fit of rage, tried to flee the city and was arrested at O'Hare for violating the terms of his new asset freeze. In less than 72 hours, the Bianchi problem was over. He was trapped in a legal hell he couldn't possibly understand, all without a single drop of Costello blood being spilled. The safe house was quiet. Sophia was standing by the window, watching the river. She looked tired but calm. The knot of fear that had lived in her stomach for 5 years was finally gone. Alessandro came up behind her. He didn't touch her, but she could feel the heat radiating off him. It's done, he said. It's done, she agreed. He's finished. He'll be buried in lawsuits and federal charges for the rest of his life. His legitimate business partners have all cut ties. He's a leper. That's what happens when you burn the nest, she said. He was quiet for a long moment. And what about your nest, Sophia? The one in D.C. General Price? She tensed. You held up your end of the bargain. I held up mine. Now it's your turn. I made some calls, he said, moving to his desk. He picked up a single sheet of paper. My contacts at Aegis. They owed me. Price isn't just an executive. He's protected. Deep state connections. You were right to run. You can't touch him with lawyers or the police. So you're backing out? She said, her voice turning to ice. I don't back out, he said. He handed her the paper. It was an itinerary, a flight to Geneva, Switzerland, for next week. General Price is attending a private energy summit at the Beau Rivage Hotel, Alessandro said. He's giving a speech on global risk and new energy markets. He'll be there for 3 days. His security will be heavy, but it will be private, not government. She looked at him. And I'll be there too, for a logistics meeting. My men will create a window, a brief, chaotic window. What you do with that window is up to you. He was offering her what she'd craved for 5 years, not just revenge, but justice, closure. Why? She asked, her voice thick. You've won. You have your city. Why risk an international incident for me? He stepped closer, finally closing the distance between them. He raised a hand and gently, almost reverently, tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers grazed her cheek. She didn't flinch. Because, he said, his voice a low growl, this was never just about the city. This was about you. I don't just want your mind, Sophia. I want the woman who wields it. He saw the analyst fade from her eyes, replaced by something softer, something that was just for him. You're not a liability, he whispered. You're not a weapon. You're an asset, my asset, and I protect what's mine. Alessandro. He cut her off, not with words, but by leaning in and capturing her lips. The kiss was not a joke. It was not crude, like his men, or simple, like her old life. It was a hostile takeover. It was a signed contract. It was a promise of loyalty and a threat of possession, all at once. When he pulled back, they were both breathless. Pack your bags, Sophia, he said. We're going to Switzerland. The plan for Geneva was set. The safe house had transformed from a bunker into a war room, and then into a home. Sophia and Alessandro had spent the last week in the intense, focused bubble of planning their counter-move against General Price. But the line between strategist and boss had irrevocably blurred. Late-night planning sessions, fueled by coffee and a shared cold anger, bled into quiet, shared dinners. Those dinners bled into a shared bed. For Alessandro, it was like finding a part of himself he never knew was missing. He had never met anyone who challenged him, who saw the world with the same ruthless, strategic clarity. He was used to being the smartest person in every room. Now, he was just glad to be in the room with her. For Sophia, the terror of her old life was finally being burned away by the heat of this new one. She had never met a man who wasn't terrified of her intelligence. Most were intimidated. Price had tried to destroy her for it. Alessandro, however, wasn't just unafraid of her mind. He was captivated by it. He saw her intellect not as a threat, but as the most dangerous and attractive thing about her. They were preparing to leave, 2 suitcases packed for Geneva standing by the door, when Alessandro's private encrypted phone rang. The sound was a jarring intrusion. He glanced at the caller ID. Marco. Boss, Marco said the second Alessandro answered. His voice was strained, the word tight with panic. We have a problem, a big one, a disaster. Alessandro's good mood evaporated. He put the call on speaker. What is it? Bianchi. He's not in federal lockup. He's gone. Sophia froze, a shirt she was folding slipping from her fingers. What? That's impossible. We saw the arrest report. We watched the news. He's in federal custody. He was, Marco said, his voice sounding sick. He was being transferred from the downtown lockup to the main facility this morning. He never made it. A transfer van. Black, armored, no plates. It wasn't our guys, Alex, and it damn sure wasn't the feds. They're screaming jurisdiction at each other, and no one knows where he is. He was intercepted. A cold dread, familiar and sharp as a shard of glass, settled in Sophia's stomach. It was the same feeling she'd had the day her car went off the bridge. Aegis, she whispered, her voice hollow. Alessandro looked at her, his eyes darkening. What? It's Price, she said, her mind racing, connecting the data points with terrifying speed. He must have had a flag on my name, some deep-level alert I couldn't see. He heard the terrorism chatter in Chicago, connected it to Bianchi, connected that to you. And he put it all together. He realized I was alive, and I was working for you. She gripped the edge of the table. He didn't intercept Bianchi to save him. He intercepted him to find me. He's using Bianchi as a bloodhound. He's still in the city, Alessandro realized, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. Boss, Marco said, his voice frantic on the phone. My men on the perimeter are gone dark. The feed from the lobby, it just... The secure line went dead, cut off with a digital click. At the exact same moment, the entire safe house died. The lights snapped off. The humming server wall went silent. The monitors displaying security feeds went black. The only illumination came from the emergency glow of the floor lights, casting their faces in a sickly green. Rico! Alessandro yelled into his comms piece, tapping his ear. Rico! All teams, sound off! Only static answered. The building is compromised, Alessandro stated, the calm of a commander settling over him. He moved to a hidden safe in the wall, his thumb pressing against a biometric scanner. We're in the dark. It's a clean sweep, Sophia said, her voice shaking but her mind clear. He's cut us off. He knows our defenses. He knows the protocols. These aren't Mafia thugs, Alex. They're Tier 1. A loud, muffled boom echoed from far below them, a vibration that traveled up the building's core. The lobby. They were blowing the elevator shafts. My men are in the lobby and the stairwells, Alessandro said, pulling his custom Sig Sauer from the safe and chambering around. They're the best. They can hold them. Not against Aegis operatives, Sophia said, her face pale. They're not expecting this. They're expecting street-level war, not a state-level decapitation strike. They'll be on this floor in 3 minutes. Alessandro grabbed her arm. To the safe room. It's behind the server wall. Titanium-plated, separate air supply. We can wait them out. No, she yelled, pulling him away from the wall. That's the first place they'll go. It's a nest, a hard target. They'll expect it. They'll cut a hole in it and flood it with gas. We have to think like them. What wouldn't they expect? She ran to the massive glass wall overlooking the river. Her eyes scanned the exterior. Here, the window washing apparatus. It's on a separate power line. It's our only way out. Alessandro looked at the small metal platform 50 stories above the ground. You're insane. I'm alive, she retorted, her voice hard. She smashed the glass on a fire safety box, but instead of an axe, she grabbed a key. She jammed it into a small, unmarked lock on the window frame and hit an emergency release. With a hiss of hydraulics, the window unlocked. A blast of cold November air filled the room. From the stairwell door, they heard it, the precise, metallic click of a breaching charge being set. They're here, Alessandro growled. He shoved the window open and practically threw her out onto the small platform, climbing out behind her. Sophia's fingers, shaking, fumbled with the controls. She slammed the down button. The platform lurched and began its slow, agonizingly loud descent down the side of the skyscraper. They'll see us, Alessandro yelled over the wind. They'll expect us to go up to the roof, For an air evac, or down to the garage for a car," she screamed back. "They won't expect this." They had descended 10 floors, each one a separate eternity, when the first operative, a black-clad spider, rappelled down the side of the building from the roof. He saw them, and his assault rifle barked. "Get down!" Alessandro roared, shoving Sophia flat onto the platform's metal grate. He returned fire, his handgun sounding like a pop gun against the rifle's thunder. A bullet ricocheted off the platform's railing, spraying sparks inches from Sophia's face. "He's cut the line!" Sophia screamed, pointing up. The operative wasn't just shooting. He had sliced through the platform's main power cable. The platform shuddered, bucked, and slammed to a halt, swinging wildly 40 stories above the dark, icy Chicago River. Another operative appeared above them, setting up a new rappel line. They were trapped, a pendulum target. "This is it," Alessandro said, his voice grim. He grabbed her hand, his gun still raised. "No, it's not," Sophia said, her mind working, calculating angles, stress tolerances. "The 35th floor. It's a law firm. They're empty. It's the only dark floor. We have to swing. We have to break the glass. It's tempered safety glass. We can't. We can if we hit it hard enough. Trust me." The operative above them was taking aim, a red laser dot dancing across Alessandro's chest. "Push!" Sophia yelled. They braced their feet against the building's facade, pushing off with all their strength. The platform swung out over the void, then back in. "Now!" she yelled. They threw their combined weight against the building. The platform slammed into the glass. It spiderwebbed in a terrifying, beautiful pattern, but didn't break. "Again!" Alessandro roared. They swung back and slammed into it again. A bullet pinged off the metal above Sophia's head. On the third slam, the glass shattered, exploding inward. They didn't wait for it to stop swinging. They tumbled through the broken frame into a dark, empty office, rolling over shards of glass and desk chairs. "Move!" Alessandro yelled, pulling her up. They ran for the fire escape, but the door was thrown open. A soldier in full tack gear stood there, rifle raised. Before Alessandro could fire, a calm voice called out from the darkness. "Stand down, Doctor. And you, Mr. Costello. It's over." General Mark Price walked into the office, flanked by 2 more soldiers. He was an older man, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the cold, dead eyes of a shark. And with him, held by the collar of his ruined suit like a dog, was a bruised and terrified Marcus Bianchi. "Sophia," Price said, with a sickeningly paternal smile, "you've been a very, very difficult woman to find. I'm impressed, but you always were sloppy when you were emotional. You should have stayed dead. Still, I must thank Mr. Bianchi. His noisy failure was the breadcrumb I needed. She's the one," Bianchi sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at Sophia. "She's the witch who ruined me. I told you she was with him." "Shut up, Marcus," Price said, with bored annoyance, then shoved him to his knees. "She did, indeed. She's very good." Price looked at Alessandro, his gaze analytical. "You've been a problem, Mr. Costello. A real thorn. My associates in this city don't appreciate your new, efficient methods. They preferred the old chaos. It was good for business." "You," Alessandro realized, his gun still in his hand, though he was hopelessly outmatched. "You weren't just selling data. You were Bianchi's food source. You were backing him against me. You were trying to destabilize my territory." "Of course," Price smiled. "A good analyst always has a diverse portfolio. Unfortunately, this little project is now terminated, and I'm afraid I have to clean up this loose end." He raised his pistol, aiming it not at Alessandro, but directly at Sophia. "You won't," Sophia said, her voice shaking but her eyes finding his. She stepped calmly in front of Alessandro. "Oh, I will, my dear. This is the end." "Because I'm not the only one who's been busy," Sophia said. "You're attending the Geneva summit next week to talk about global risk. You know who the keynote speaker is?" Price frowned. "That's classified." "It's Director Evans of the NSA," Sophia said. "And 3 days ago, I sent a little data packet to his private encrypted server. The entire data packet, Mark. All your sales, all your accounts, everything. With a little time release, it's set to go public in exactly 4 hours. The only way to stop it is a 128-character deauthorization code, which is in my head." Price's face went white with fury. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Sophia challenged. "I spent 5 years as a waitress, Mark. 5 years of being paranoid. You think I didn't build a dead man's switch? Kill me and your entire life is over. The Tribune will be the least of your problems. You'll be tried for treason." Price stared at her, his hand trembling, his mask of control shattered. He was beaten. "But," Sophia continued, pressing her advantage, "let us walk out of here. Give me him." She motioned to the whimpering Bianchi. "And I'll disarm the packet. You can go back to DC, and I'll go back to my life. We never see each other again." Price was in an impossible position. He looked at Alessandro, at Sophia, and back at Bianchi. "You bitch," he snarled. "I'm a good analyst," she corrected. Price looked at Bianchi with pure disgust. "He's yours. A get-well gift." He lowered his gun. "You have 1 hour to disarm it. Then I'm coming for you, Sophia. I don't care where you go." "You won't," Sophia said, her voice turning to ice. "Because the second I'm clear, a different packet goes to your wife. The one about your associate in Zurich, and her private bank account. I'm sure she'll be fascinated by the financial irregularities." Price's face turned a shade of mottled purple. He had never been so completely outmaneuvered. He gave a sharp, angry nod to his men. "We're out. Let them go." The soldiers and Price vanished down the hall, as silent as ghosts. It was just Alessandro, Sophia, and the whimpering, pathetic form of Marcus Bianchi. Alessandro was looking at Sophia, his expression one of pure, unfiltered adoration. A dead man's switch, and a blackmail file on his wife. "I'm a good analyst," she repeated, her knees finally buckling. He caught her, pulling her upright, his arm a steel bar around her waist. "You're a queen." Bianchi looked up, confused, his face a mask of terror. What happens now? The feds?" Alessandro looked down at the man who had started it all. He straightened his tie, his other hand still holding Sophia steady. "You were right about one thing, Marcus. She is the one who ruined you." Alessandro raised his pistol, its black mouth aimed at Bianchi's head. "And she's the one who gets to finish it." He offered the gun to Sophia, handle first. She looked at the weapon. She looked at the pathetic man on the floor, weeping. Then she looked at Alessandro, at the man who saw her as his equal, his queen. She shook her head. She slowly, deliberately, pushed Alessandro's hand down until the gun was pointing at the floor. "No," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We're done with him. He's nothing. A rabid dog with no teeth. The feds can have what's left. We have bigger things to do." She grabbed the front of Alessandro's suit, pulled him down, and kissed him, hard, right in front of the man who had tried to destroy them both. It was a kiss of ownership, of partnership, and of victory. "Let's go home." 1 year later, the restaurant that had once been Galliano's was a monument to a new empire. Alessandro had bought it, gutted it, and reborn it from the ground up. The dark, musty booths and hidden corners were gone, replaced by Costellos on the river. It was a sprawling, multi-level testament to steel, glass, and light. Floor-to-ceiling windows gave a commanding 180-degree view of the city and the Chicago River. It was no longer a place for secret meetings in the shadows. It was a fortress of glass where power was displayed, not hidden. At the head of the best table, in the same spot where the old Costello booth used to be, sat Alessandro. And at his right hand, not behind him or beside him, but as his clear equal, sat Sophia. She was no longer Ilara, the mousy waitress. She was not even just Sophia, the brilliant analyst. Her dark hair was styled in a sleek, severe bob that framed her face. She wore a custom-tailored dress in a graphite grey, the colour of a shadow, and on her finger the simple platinum band was eclipsed by the massive, square-cut diamond Alessandro had given her. The most significant change was her eyes. The fear was gone. The cold, analytical light was still there, but it was now warmed by a new, constant fire. Authority. A large, familiar man approached their table, his shoulders filling out his expensive suit. It was Tony, the capo who had once snickered at the idea of a waitress having an opinion. Now he approached the table with his head slightly bowed, his eyes fixed on Sophia. "Mr. Costello," he nodded, before turning his full attention to her. "Donna Costello, the new terminal manifests just came in. The agricultural shipment from South America. We have a 5-day window, but our usual transport route is under increased observation." He was asking for permission for a solution, and he was asking her. Sophia didn't even look at the data tablet he was holding. "The observation is a seasonal quota," she said, her voice clear and carrying in the restaurant. "It's temporary. Don't reroute. Move the window. The manifests you're looking at are for next week, but the real priority is the medical equipment going to Dubai. Use the transport from that shipment to move the agricultural goods. They get a secure, high-priority escort, and the quota problem is over by the time the Dubai shipment is rescheduled." Tony stared, his mind clearly working to catch up. He finally broke into a grin of pure admiration. "2 problems, 1 truck. Of course, Donna. Thank you." "Don't thank me, Tony," she said, finally looking up at him, her eyes sharp. "Just get it done." "Yes, ma'am." He nodded again and retreated, walking with a new purpose. Alessandro watched him go, a slow smile spreading across his face. He turned to his wife. "A year ago, Tony wanted to solve a problem by hitting it with a bat. Now he's asking my wife for advice on supply chain logistics. You've civilized him." "I've made him more profitable," Sophia corrected, taking a sip of wine. "There's a difference." As if on cue, their consigliere, Marco, approached. He looked 10 years younger, the old world stress gone, replaced by the clean efficiency of their new operation. He was now the COO of the Costello Group. "Mr. Costello, Mrs. Costello," he said, the respect in his voice genuine. He placed a thin tablet on the table. "The City Council just announced their decision, the new citywide security contract. We got it." Alessandro let out a slow breath. This was a massive win, the final step in their move to legitimacy. "Aegis Defense must be furious," Sophia said, her voice flat, though a spark danced in her eyes. "They held that contract for a decade." "They are," Marco confirmed, allowing himself a rare smile. "Their bid was old world. More men, more guns. Your proposal, the one using predictive analytics for resource deployment, forecasting crime before it happens. The council said it was revolutionary. They didn't just lose, Donna. They were made to look obsolete." "Good," Sophia said. "There's more," Marco continued, his smile widening, "about our old friend, General Price." Sophia tensed, her wine glass stopping halfway to her lips. "It seems General Price was just Retired. Forcefully. The board at Aegis found financial irregularities in his portfolio. Apparently, Marco leaned in conspiratorially. His wife was very helpful in the investigation. Something about a gift in Zurich. She cleaned him out, took the house, and handed the board every piece of dirt she had. Sophia's smile was slow, cold, and utterly terrifying. What a shame. The old guard is gone, Donna, Marco said, bowing to her. The company is in chaos. They're vulnerable. He gave a final, respectful nod and left them alone. Silence settled between them. Alessandro reached across the table and took his wife's hand. Her skin was warm, her grip strong. So, Alessandro said, his voice a low, intimate rumble. You got your revenge. You got your justice. You toppled the man who ruined you and made his entire company look like fools. And you did it all without getting your hands dirty. I'm a good analyst, she whispered. The old phrase now an inside joke between them. You're a queen, he corrected, and this is your kingdom. But I know you, Sophia. You're not done. What's next? Sophia turned from her husband and looked out the massive window. The Chicago skyline glittered before her, the lights of the city reflected in her cool, grey eyes. Aegis is in chaos, she said, her mind already moving, connecting the dots. But they still have a major foothold in European energy. Their entire risk model for the Baltic is based on Price's old algorithm, which I know for a fact is flawed. It doesn't account for the new Arctic supply chains. They're overextended, and they don't even know it. She turned back to him, a predatory gleam in her eyes that matched his own. I think it's time the Costello Group diversifies. A new security and logistics hub in Amsterdam, perhaps? Alessandro laughed, a deep, genuine sound that few ever heard. He had asked a joke of a mousy waitress, and in return, she had given him the world. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. I have to admit, he said, his voice dropping, I never knew hostile takeovers could be this sexy. You just needed a new analyst, she whispered, leaning across the table to kiss him. And I was just looking for a new line of work. And so, the waitress who was once invisible became the most powerful woman in the city. Sophia Vance proved that the sharpest weapon isn't a gun, it's a mind that sees 10 moves ahead. She didn't just get revenge, she rewrote the rules and built an empire from the ashes of her old life. The Don got his queen, and the city got a new boss. If you loved this story of drama, twists, and ice-cold karma, don't keep it a secret. This is the kind of storytelling we do every single week. Make sure to hit that like button, share this video with a friend who loves a good power play, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications. You don't want to miss the next story.